Good morning, Chris, Carrie and Scarlett. It's very nice for you two to come in today so that I can have a little chat with you and Scarlett.
Thank you.
I know you've been through a really, really difficult time over the last week or so, and you've been really, really poorly, Scarlett, haven't you? But I hope you're beginning to feel better now. I realise you've probably got 5 or 6 days left with us in hospital while you're finishing off your course of antibiotics. And it would seem a good time to have a little chat with you all to see if we can help for future planning, so that if for any reason you became poorly again, things would run a little bit more smoothly and will be a little bit less scary for you. We do have now in place the possibility of creating an emergency healthcare plan, which a number of families carry for children who have chronic conditions like cystic fibrosis.
Okay.
And what that means is that her standard care that she normally has and her antibiotics are all written down quite clearly. And any events that she's had, like this last one, are also detailed with what happened to her, what treatment she needed to make her better.
Yeah.
So that if you became poorly again, maybe not as poorly, but became poorly again, then you would carry a copy, and the emergency department would have a copy, intensive care in the ward she normally goes to, but also you'd be able to have the copy to take on holiday or if she goes on school trips, so that if she did become unwell, it's clearly written what they must do, take her straight to A&E, and to tell also shows A&E about her history and what she needs to have.
That sounds a really good idea.
Yeah.
So I remember when it was all going on, there were just so many questions flying around. It was really scary. Were we given the right information, or just even?
But that would really help, wouldn't
yeah,
it?
it sounds.
Well, I think it would help, because at times of crisis, it's even difficult to remember whether she took her medicine that morning, and which antibiotic it was.
Yeah.
Because everything goes out of your mind, and it's all written down and there for you. So I think it might be worth something to think about before you go home.
Definitely,
Anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Scarlett, what about you, my love? We've chatted to Mum and Dad about these last few days and what they found scary. Was there anything in particular that you found the most scariest or the most worrying?
With all the poor people around talking about me, and I don't understand them, and they're all strangers to me.
It is very scary, very scary. So what I was talking to Mum and Dad about, I'm not sure how much you understood about that, but it was just about an emergency healthcare plan, that it's called, which is just a couple of pieces of paper that explains that you have cystic fibrosis and what medicines you need and what the people need to do if you become poorly. And you keep a copy of that, or Mum and Dad have a copy with you, and there's a copy in the hospital, so that if you did come in, everybody would know what medicine you need, and therefore hopefully it would be a little bit less scary. Would you like me to pave the way with Dr. Rudd about possibly putting together a plan of some sort? And you can talk to him too and tell him what you want there as well, okay? Because you're the person who's got cystic fibrosis, okay? So you're very important in this, Dr.
I'd be happy to
Rudd,
talk
okay?
to Dr. Rudd.
So I'm going to go and have a little chat with him, and he'll come and see you in the next day or so. Obviously, probably, maybe even later today, I don't know. But I'll pave the way and say I've mentioned this emergency healthcare plan to you. In the meantime, I suggest it can be helpful if you have quietly just sort of a think and possibly jot down any more questions you have on paper,
Yeah.
so that when he does come to talk to you, and that's you too, Scarlett, you think of everything you want to know.
Because we never
Okay.
remember at the time.
You don't,
So
it's very difficult.
Just out of your head,
So
isn't it?
it doesn't matter how small it is,
Yeah.
or whether you think it matters or not. If it matters to you, then it's important, okay? So jot everything down on paper, and then we can go through it all again with Dr. Rudd,
Okay.
Yeah.
okay?
That's great. Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Hi guys, hi Scarlett. Thank you for coming to see me. You know everybody here. You've met Di, who I think has set this meeting up.
Yeah.
And you haven't met Dr. Cottrell.
No.
Serena is one of the emergency department consultants, so she was in charge of the department when Scarlett came in the other day, and I thought it might be quite handy just to have her here while we were talking through plans for the future.
Nice to meet you. And it's Chris and Carrie, isn't
That's
it?
right.
And Scarlett, obviously the most important.
Probably the easiest thing is, I know it's been a horrible couple of weeks for you. Do you want to just tell me where you got to in terms of your thinking? Because I know you spoke with Di yesterday and started talking about this emergency healthcare plan.
Yeah.
What do you understand? What are your thoughts?
Well, we thought it was a really good idea. Having gone through all the almost chaos when Scarlett was ill, and it just really brought out the worst in me. I know.
No, me too, and then us, and then
So
Yeah.
it seemed a great idea to actually try and bring it together when we're sort of thinking more.
I mean, the background to it is we haven't had them very long. We started using them a few years ago, and we started really using them with children with very severe illness, where it was a sort of a, do they have resuscitation, do they not have resuscitation sort of conversation. But obviously what we've realised is that there's a group of children with chronic serious illness where actually that's quite it's an important part of a conversation, but it's a very small part. And actually what's much more important is that you know that there's one place where we can write down what problems she's got, what problems she's had, and what you want us to do about those problems to try and help us in the hospital or in the emergency department or at school or in the ambulance or wherever she is, on holiday or wherever, for people to actually understand what's been going on with her before and what we'd all like to do in her best interests if things happen again. I guess the most important thing that I want you guys to know is that just because it's written down, that doesn't mean that's the way it is forever.
right, because
Okay?
we
And I
were
think,
talking about
yeah,
that. Yeah.
I think what we understand with cystic fibrosis and with lots of illnesses is that things change with time, and the child changes and what they want, and you know how much treatment they want, and different sorts of treatment changes. And so just because we've agreed one thing in July doesn't mean we have to stick with that
No,
for September if things have changed.
That was one of my questions.
No, absolutely. And so what we have to do with this form is we have to sit down, write it, we all agree with it, and we only sign it if we all agree.
Yeah.
And we send it off to all the people who might need to know what was going to happen in certain situations.
Yes.
And then we review that, and sometimes we'll review that every 6 months, sometimes a year, it just depends. But equally, if you said to me, well actually, you know what we said a couple of months ago, we've changed our minds or we want to change that, well that's absolutely fine
And
as well.
even if we arrive somewhere with it and we change our minds there and then, we can still do that, can we?
There are two really important things, and Serena, working in the emergency department, will have lots of people coming to her really very sick,
Yes.
and people will hopefully arrive with this sort of information for the person in the emergency department. But there's two really important things. One is that she always has to feel that she's acting in her patient's best interest.
Yes.
And two, you have to feel able to help with decisions and help with plans, and nothing is ever written in stone. This is just a
Right.
guide.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else.
It also makes it much easier if we all know where we're starting from.
Yes.
So if Scarlett, you come in and you're very unwell, we've got the information about who to contact and how to contact them, very importantly, so that we can get Mummy and Daddy there as quickly as possible if you're on a school trip, for example.
Yes, that's good, darling. Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to ask me about the emergency department?
What happens if I don't want to go to the place that I went to at the beginning?
The other important thing, Scarlett, I think, is that sometimes, I mean, you know, you've got a drip in your arm and you didn't want to have a drip because it hurts. Sometimes to make you better, there are things that we have to do that aren't nice, that you don't like. But at least if we've thought about it before, and at least if we've kind of talked with you and tried to decide, is there a nicer way of looking after you, or that we can do things slightly differently. At least if we know that you're scared of something or worried about something, or if we know that there's something that your mum and dad are scared or worried about, at least we can have thought about it. It may still be that you do have to go back to the emergency department if that's the best place for you to go, but at least if we know these things, then we can be thinking about them ahead of time.
Did
That's
you
what we
write
all
any
want.
questions down in Mum's book?
Yes, she did.
Do you remember what they were? Should we have a look?
We had written at the back, didn't you? Do you remember the one about?
I was coughing so much and lots of blood was coming out
Mhm.
and I thought I was going to die. Could I have died?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Is this the first time you thought about that, or has that been bothering you from before you came into hospital?
It's bothering before I...
Yeah, okay. I think one of the things that we have to make sure is that we try to not let that happen again if we can, okay? And I can't promise you anything, and I can't promise you that you're not going to get more chest infections because you've got cystic fibrosis, and chances are you are going to have more chest infections. What we have to try really, really hard to do is to make sure that we treat them properly and quickly so that you don't get so poorly again. Okay, so I can't promise you anything, and there is a chance that you could get really poorly again like you did before. But what this form is all about is to try and make sure that we treat you quickly and properly to try and get you healthy again. Okay?
And we'll know, because we've got the plan, that that's something that has happened before, and we'll be ready for it, and so we'll be able to treat it very quickly rather than it being something that we didn't know was going to happen.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, that's quite a scary question to ask, isn't it? Maybe you want to think about that a little bit more and talk with your mum and dad, and we can talk about it a little bit more sometime when I see you in clinic, if it's still bothering you. Okay.
And that was one of our questions, wasn't it, Chris? It was about, say for example, on the school trip, if she has to go to another hospital, the plan will go with her.
More and more places are using them and starting to recognise them. And so if you were on holiday somewhere else in the country and you took this in with you, then that would certainly, I'm sure, be very, very helpful to them.
Okay.
Now, it may not be that they're used to using it, so
No.
they'd still have to talk to you about it, but at least it's a really good place to start.
Yeah.
They also have your contact details on the plan,
Yes.
so that with all the mobile numbers and
Yes.
everything, so if the emergency department need to get hold of you quickly,
Yes.
they can find everything in one place.
Yes.
And my
That's
contact details
very
as well.
reassuring,
And that's,
yeah.
that's important, that,
Yeah.
that they
So they can contact
exactly,
you.
they can get somebody who knows her medically well as quickly as possible.
It's really,
Yeah.
really reassuring.
Is there anything else I've left out from your point of view?
No, I think everything's been covered, but we can always come and have this conversation again. So if her situation changes or anybody changes their mind, the best way to do that is to talk to either the community nurse or to Di, and we can always come back and talk about more questions that you have.
Yes.